Hello and welcome. If you're anything like me, you've had wrist injury at some point in your yoga practice. And I've had plenty, to be honest, and in all different types of areas, on the outside, on the inside, on the top, on the bottom, just the whole bloody thing sometimes. And it can be pretty frustrating because, so much of the yoga practice demands that we're on the hands. A lot of it has to do with shoulder positioning and hand positioning when we're taking load on the hands. Things like downward facing dog, plank position, and of course arm balances. And so a lot of it in the yoga practice doesn't focus on strengthening the forearms, which we need to keep the wrists nice and stable, and other things like grip strength, the strength of the hand, and then mobility, taking the wrist in all of its different directions and keeping that sense of health and function there through a combination of strength and flexibility. Quite often what I see is people with wrist injuries continue to try and stretch them to try and resolve that issue. And quite often that's not really the way to go, although it's a part of the journey in rehabilitation or in injury prevention. And so in this video, we're going to go over some of the very quick and effective things that I've learned to prevent injury from happening, to recover from injury, and just to generally keep the wrists and hands nice and healthy over, a lifetime of yoga practice. So let's begin, shall we? So these exercises are really effective to do, and I really suggest doing them before you start your yoga practice, especially if you've got wrist issues going on, but even just to keep your wrists nice and healthy and to feel nice and stable and open through your wrists coming into a practice. I think just taking that extra couple of minutes before you start your class is a really good thing to do. So let's try and keep these quick and effective. We don't need to do heaps of it, but just bringing blood flow, bringing activation to the forearms, the hands, the wrists themselves around that joint and the muscles. This is going to be good stuff to help you through your practice and generate quite a bit more support into the wrist region. There's another video on this channel about shoulder positioning, especially in things like downward facing dog, plank position, and arm balances. And that's really what we want to be focusing on to take the pressure off the wrists in the long run. Quite often wrist injury, I think, is happening because of a less than optimal position in the shoulders when we're putting weight through the hands. So check that video out. The link is there. But let's get into these little practices now. So the first thing to do, and it's a bit of a gymnastics drill and a fantastic one, and it's something that I call palm push-ups. And so we're trying to keep the fingers on the ground all the way to the last knuckle and just start to lift the palms. Now this might be a little bit tricky for some people to begin with, to keep sort of the palms lifting but the knuckles down. So do your best with it and do what you can with it. The more weight that you shift forward with your shoulders, obviously the more challenging it gets. But you'll feel real heat, real almost fatigue starting to happen, pretty quickly. So take it at your discretion. It doesn't have to be terribly fast, but I wouldn't do it terribly slow either. Now notice that you can put emphasis in different areas of the hand. Here I'm rolling a little bit towards the index finger and thumb side, and then there's obviously the opportunity to take it a bit more towards the pinky and ring finger side. So do a little combination of both. Notice where it feels more challenging, and over the course of your practice, do that one more. So a good 30 seconds to a minute of this is more than enough to get some heat pumping. And my methodology is activation and then stretch. So as we activate, we get that pump going through the wrist. I can feel it already. And then turning the hands around and having a stretch into that position. So for some of us, maybe the hands turning out a little bit more, but ultimately really trying to look for the fingers to face backwards. The more intensity you want, the closer you bring your pinky fingers together. In this position, try and relax the shoulders as much as possible. Let them drop. And here, you'll feel it pretty quickly, sinking some weight backwards towards the heels. Now again, relaxing the shoulders, trying not to lock out the elbows. So soften the elbows a little bit. And you can play with this position even by lifting the palms and dropping the elbows back a little bit. That can sometimes feel a bit more acute towards the wrist area, and just some very light movement from left to right. Now, we kind of want to do these things until it feels a little bit yucky. We're getting into that region of discomfort because that's where the growth is starting to happen. Now, obviously, no force and no strain. You're not trying to push this until, something breaks. You don't want to strain yourself just warming up the wrist. So be gentle, be honest with your body, and be generally more nurturing than forceful. I'll just go one more big breath here, and then we might just give the hands a little bit of a shake and a pump through the fingers before now turning the palms to face up and the fingers in towards the middle of your mat. And then opening and closing the fingers. As you do this, and open your hands, push the fingernails into the floor. So you're kind of flicking the hands open, but also do curl the fingers in towards your palm, as best as you can. In this, do try and keep your elbows fairly straight, but they don't have to be perfectly straight. But there's a big difference in having the elbows somewhat straight compared to out here. I mean, both are welcome, but you'll feel it a bit more if the elbows are a little bit straighter. Again, never locking out the elbows, no need. We'll just take a few more rounds of breath, a little bit of pace into this one, because a lot of this stuff is about blood flow. A lot of this is about activation, especially in terms of rehabbing and protecting the wrists even. So prehab and rehab, it's all about activation. It's very rarely about stretching. Stretching helps with the blood flow as well. It creates good length through the muscles and eventually maybe the tendons and things like that. But really, it's about strength. It's about supporting the wrists with forearm activation, hand activation, grip strength, things like that. Let's release, and then taking the hands, it might give them a little rest in between. Just let them neutralize so there's no weight on them, nothing's happening. And then turn the palms out to the sides, or the fingers out to the sides, palms face down, and then just shifting some body weight from left to right. Now, as you shift the body weight over to one side, push those fingers into the floor. So as the weight goes over, you're resisting the force through the palm. We'll just take one or two more rocks from left to right here. So this is a short stop doing this one. You could do it for longer, but today I'm going to leave it as a little bit shorter. And then let's get into a bit of a stretchy one. And I think it's one of the stronger ones we can do here. So lay the forearm, let's say the right arm, onto the ground. So the elbow to the hand is all the way down and it's sideways in front of you. Close the hand, make a fist, thumb on top of the fingers, and then with your other hand, your spare hand, close that fist. And it doesn't need to be anything crazy. We're just going to use that other hand to keep that fist closed. Now from here, be gentle, go really, really slowly. Pick up the elbow from the floor and keep the back of the hand on the ground. Now I can feel it nearly immediately. As you start to straighten your elbow, you'll feel it stretch through the top of the hand into the wrist. Now generally, if you're fairly comfortable, if you've got a fairly straight elbow, start to turn the elbow forward. So turning the elbow forward. The index finger and middle finger is usually where the most tension is. So you could loosen off the grip a little bit on the index finger, but don't let it go. We're still trying to stretch into that region, ooh, that is strong, I'll have you know. You're trying to stretch a little bit more towards the top of the forearm into that index finger side of the wrist and into the forearm. Kind of feels quite good after a few breaths. And so again, trying to chill out a little bit through the shoulders. We'll just go one more nice long breath here. And then gently release the elbow down, release the hand. And again, a little bit of a pulse and a pump. And then we switch it up. And then again, closing the fist. Shut that fist down and then lift the elbow. Oh, that's the good side. And then maybe, so I'm right-handed. You find little details. It highlights some real details about what's going on in your hands and your wrists and your forearms, just doing these little exercises. Again, elbow rather, starting to turn forward and again, softening the shoulder. You'll notice your shoulders bunching up quite often through these little exercises. So try not to let them. We're trying to keep the emphasis on the forearms, on that wrist area, into the hands, whether it's the back of the hand, like the top of the hand, or the palm side. Again, it's just like a little yoga practice here. Breathing, softening and soothing. Take just a couple more breaths here. And again, you might shift a bit more body weight over to one side and just play with the position. And then as you're ready, release. Elbow releases, hands release. Again, a little pump and a pulse of the hand. Just get blood flow coming back in. And then last little couple of things we do. So one of my favorite is to reach the arms in front of you and then turn the palms, cross the wrists, and catch a hold. Interlace the fingers with cross wrists, and then bring that fist inside towards your chest, inside the arms, and then feel the twist. Feel the twist on the wrist. Now don't go crazy, but try and bring the elbows a little further together, and then lift the hands up. Lift the hands up. Again, soft shoulders. And you'll feel one wrist has a little bit more emphasis on it. You're not trying to go crazy with it. You're not trying to push it and milk it dry, but feeling right to the edge of that. I'll just take 2 more big breaths. For some of us, you might be reaching the arms forward. Not for me. I keep the shoulders soft. Just 1 more big breath here. And then before we carry on, kind of unravel this just so we can keep track of the wrists. So hands down, out in front of you. Now notice which wrist is on top, and then just go straight to the other side. So mine, the left one is on top. I'm going to switch it over, and now the right arm on top. Interlace the fingers and bring it back through, and hopefully you're onto the other side. And again, elbows sort of coming together, so the forearms close a little bit, and then bring it up into the wrist. And you can play with little things like tilting the fist forward a little bit more. We'll just take another couple of breaths here. Again, nothing, you're not trying to crank anything, never trying to crank anything in the stretchy stuff. Just really gentle applications, more about duration of the hold more than anything else. And just 1 more big breath here, maybe just a little longer. And then this time we can release nice and slowly. So giving the wrists a nice little roll out. Again, pumping the hands gets good sort of function. Even just doing this, if you were really short on time and you just want to do something really fast, I reckon this would be the thing to do. Opening and closing the hands would be something to do really, really quickly. So like what we were doing on the floor, opening the fingers right out, this is called extension on the fingers, and then flexion, squeezing them in. So all the way in, all the way out, but quite fast. Flick and close. Let's take another breath or two. Now, the next little one, I think, would be sort of additional to what we've done. So it's sort of like an add-on if you wanted to. It's a little less familiar for a lot of people's wrists, especially for the yoga practice, but I think it's really beneficial, especially if you wanted to do a little bit more rehab. So what we've done already is more than enough to prepare you for your yoga practice. I feel really warm, really open through my wrists as it is right now. But if you wanted a little bit more, fists on the ground, palms facing in towards each other, and then just rolling forward onto where the thumb and the index finger are, and then back, forward and back. And so here we're working like the side of the wrist. And again, nothing too harsh, but you'll notice more body weight forward, a little more intense. I'll just take another couple of breaths here. We don't have to do this for very long. It's, I think, fairly unfamiliar in like a yoga application. This is some pretty specific gymnastic stuff, but hey, those gymnasts, they know what they're doing with forearms and wrists. So I'm just going to take one more breath here and then release. And I reckon that'll do it. That doesn't need to be much more than that. Little pump, little other things that make you feel good, interlacing the hands, rolling the shoulders back, squeezing the palms. Really nice things to do. So I hope that helps. My forearms feel quite fantastic right now. I might do a yoga practice actually. Let us know how you go with this. I'd love to hear about what's happening in the wrists. There are lots of other exercises that we can do for it. And obviously if things are, staying injurious, if things aren't feeling good in the wrists, most certainly go and see a doctor or a physio. Have fun. Get on those hands. Strengthen up the wrists. Stretch and strengthen. A little bit of both. Keep them both rolling. I'll see you soon. Take care. Much love to you.